Margot Robbie's husband is a film producer. He's also producing her latest movie, Wuthering Heights, where Margot stars opposite Jacob Elordi. And right now, he's watching his wife tell interviewers about the separation anxiety she felt when Jacob wasn't on set, how Jacob filled her trailer with roses on Valentine's Day, and how she became territorial when he filmed scenes with other actresses. The internet is asking the obvious question: is this brilliant marketing, or has everyone involved lost the plot? I'm going to walk you through what's actually happening with this press tour, because there's more going on here than viral headlines suggest. And by the end, you might see this differently than you do right now. Emerald Fennell's adaptation of Wuthering Heights hits theaters on Valentine's Day 2026. That's less than 2 weeks away. After a bidding war between Warner Brothers and Netflix, the film secured a major theatrical release with Margot Robbie as Catherine Earnshaw and Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff. Robbie is also producing through her company, LuckyChap Entertainment, which she co-founded with her husband, Tom Ackerley, back in 2014. LuckyChap has an impressive track record. They produced I, Tonya, which earned Robbie an Oscar nomination. They produced Promising Young Woman, which won Emerald Fennell an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. They produced Barbie, which became the highest-grossing film of 2023 and earned over $1 billion worldwide. This is not a vanity production company. This is a legitimate powerhouse that understands how to create cultural moments. Which brings us back to Wuthering Heights, and why this press tour feels so carefully orchestrated. For those unfamiliar with the source material, Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights was published in 1847 under a male pseudonym. It tells the story of Heathcliff, an orphan brought to live at Wuthering Heights, and his relationship with Catherine Earnshaw, the daughter of the family. Their connection is intense, obsessive, and ultimately destructive. This is not a romance novel in the Jane Austen sense. There are no misunderstandings resolved by heartfelt confessions. Instead, it's a story about class, revenge, cruelty, and love twisted into something unrecognizable. Catherine famously declares, "I am Heathcliff," suggesting their souls are intertwined. But she still chooses to marry someone else for social advancement, which sets off a chain of events that destroys multiple lives across 2 generations. It's gothic, it's dark, and it's been adapted numerous times with varying degrees of success. The most famous film version is probably the 1939 adaptation starring Laurence Olivier and Merle Oberon, though that one softened the story considerably. More recent adaptations have tried to restore the novel's harshness, with mixed results. Andrea Arnold's 2011 version was praised for its raw intensity, but criticized for being too bleak. The 1992 version with Ralph Fiennes leaned heavily into the romantic elements, but felt melodramatic to some viewers. Emerald Fennell's version appears to be taking a different approach. According to interviews, she's emphasizing the erotic and romantic aspects while deliberately departing from period accuracy. The film is not trying to be a faithful historical recreation. Instead, it's using the 19th century as a backdrop for a more stylized interpretation of obsessive love. That decision has already caused significant controversy, particularly around the costumes. When the first set photos leaked in 2024, fans of the novel immediately flooded social media with criticism. The costumes don't look authentically Victorian, they're more impressionistic, mixing elements from different eras with a modern sensibility. One costume featured what looked like a deconstructed corset worn over a contemporary-looking shirt. Another showed Elordi in a coat that seemed more inspired by high fashion than historical accuracy. The backlash intensified when the trailer dropped. Twitter users wrote things like, "The costumes are worse than Bridgerton's, and that's saying something." Another comment read, "At least most period pieces make sense even if they're not accurate. This just looks random." Some fans accused the production of disrespecting Bronte's work, while others defended the creative choice as a valid artistic interpretation. The costume designers have stood by their vision. In one interview, they explained that they wanted the clothes to reflect the emotional reality of the characters rather than historical accuracy. They argued that strict period accuracy can sometimes create distance between modern audiences and classic stories, and that their approach was meant to make the characters feel immediate and visceral. Whether that gamble pays off remains to be seen. But the costume controversy, while significant, isn't what has dominated the conversation around this film. That distinction belongs to Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi, and what they've been saying about each other. In a recent Vogue interview that has since been dissected across multiple platforms, Robbie revealed details about their working relationship that raised eyebrows. She described how on Valentine's Day during filming, Elordi filled her room with roses. She clarified that he did this as Heathcliff, his character, not as himself. He included a handwritten note from Heathcliff's perspective and a small prop tombstone, referencing a pivotal scene in the novel where Heathcliff digs up Catherine's grave years after her death. Robbie's response to this gesture was telling. She said, "I remember thinking, oh, he's probably a very good boyfriend. There's a lot of thoughtfulness in this. It wasn't just the gesture of the roses. It was the note written from Heathcliff and that little tombstone thing. I was like, he crafts. Love that. It was crafty. It was meaningful. It was dramatic." When the interviewer asked what Robbie did for Elordi that same Valentine's Day, she admitted, somewhat sheepishly, that she didn't do anything. Elordi's response, according to the interview, was, "I thought you would." The exchange has a playful quality, but it also reads as flirtation. Whether that's intentional or simply how their dynamic comes across in print is debatable, but the effect is the same. Headlines immediately seized on the story. Margot Robbie says Jacob Elordi would make a great boyfriend. Jacob Elordi's Valentine's gift left Margot Robbie weak at the knees. That last phrase comes from another part of the interview where Robbie described a scene in which Elordi's Heathcliff picks up Catherine with one arm and shields her face from the rain. She said, "It almost made me weak at the knees. It was the little things that we loved as two women in our 30s, and this movie is primarily for people in our demographic." That comment is interesting for several reasons. First, it positions the film as targeting mature audiences rather than younger viewers, which is a departure from many recent romantic dramas that skew toward teens and 20-somethings. Second, it frames the film as a female-driven project, made by women for women, which aligns with Emerald Fennell's previous work on Promising Young Woman. And third, it acknowledges that the romance in this version is meant to be swoon-worthy in a way that classical adaptations sometimes aren't. But the Valentine's Day story wasn't the only revelation that sparked conversation. Later in the same Vogue interview, both actors discussed how difficult they found it to film scenes without each other. Elordi said, "I really didn't like shooting when Margot wasn't there." Robbie immediately agreed, saying, "I hated shooting when you weren't there." She then elaborated, describing a period during production when they were filming separate storylines. "There was this moment when I was off with Shahzad for God knows how long, and you were off with Allison. And I was like, this is just not right. Loved shooting with Allison, and Shahzad's a great guy, love them both more than anything. But I was like, he's mine." That last phrase, "he's mine," has been quoted repeatedly in articles about the press tour. Out of context, it sounds possessive in a way that goes beyond professional collaboration. Robbie seemed to recognize this because she also described herself as codependent during filming, explaining that she tends to become very attached to her collaborators when working on intense projects. She went into more detail about this dynamic, saying that by day 3 of production, she started looking around for Elordi whenever he wasn't in her immediate vicinity. If she couldn't see him, she'd ask crew members where he was because she'd grown so accustomed to his presence. She described it as a kind of separation anxiety, which again sounds more intense than typical coworker relationships. These aren't subtle comments. And predictably, the internet responded with a mixture of confusion, speculation, and humor. Some people are genuinely questioning whether Robbie is still married. One tweet read, "Is she divorced or something? Because she isn't acting like she's married with the things she's saying about Jacob." Another person wrote, "Spouses of actors are God's strongest warriors, because what do you mean Margot's husband has to sit and watch Jacob Elordi do these things?" Others have been more direct in their criticism. "Sorry, but isn't she married? I get that they're trying to market the movie, but I've seen literally nothing from Jacob and a million sound bites from Margot where she legitimately sounds like she's in love with him." Another comment read, "Can we all agree that we're ready for Margot Robbie to announce she's leaving her husband after all these Jacob Elordi interviews?" The speculation has gotten intense enough that some outlets have published clarifying articles confirming that yes, Margot Robbie is still married to Tom Ackerley, and no, there's no indication of marital problems. But the fact that such articles need to exist tells you something about how the press tour is being perceived. Here's where context becomes crucial. Tom Ackerley is not just Margot Robbie's husband. He's one of the producers on Wuthering Heights. He's directly involved in the film's success, both creatively and financially. And this type of press tour, where co-stars lean heavily into romantic chemistry to generate buzz, is not a new phenomenon. The most recent high-profile example happened in 2023 with Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell promoting Anyone But You. The two stars played up their chemistry so convincingly during the press tour that a significant portion of the public believed they were actually in a relationship. Paparazzi photos showed them looking cozy together. Interviews featured flirtatious banter. Social media was flooded with speculation. The only problem? Sydney Sweeney was engaged at the time. Glenn Powell was publicly dating someone else. The entire thing was, by most accounts, a deliberate marketing strategy designed to make people believe the on-screen romance extended off-screen. And it worked spectacularly. Anyone But You became a box office success, earning over $200 million worldwide despite modest expectations. Sweeney later addressed the rumors on Saturday Night Live, joking about the whole situation while making it clear that nothing inappropriate had happened. She also mentioned, somewhat pointedly, that her fiancé was a producer on the movie, the implication being that everyone involved, including her partner, was aware of and complicit in the marketing strategy. Sound familiar? The parallels to the Wuthering Heights situation are hard to ignore. Margot Robbie is not a naive newcomer to Hollywood. She's been in the industry since the early 2000s and has navigated publicity for major franchises, Oscar campaigns, and independent films. She understands how media narratives work and how to shape them to her advantage. LuckyChap, her production company, has consistently demonstrated sophisticated marketing instincts. The Barbie campaign in 2023 was a masterclass in cultural saturation, turning a toy-based movie into a genuine phenomenon through strategic partnerships, viral moments, and carefully calibrated messaging. If the same team is behind the Wuthering Heights publicity, it's reasonable to assume that nothing we're seeing is accidental. The question then becomes, is this ethical? Is it appropriate for a married woman to describe another man in romantic terms, even if it's clearly for promotional purposes? And more broadly, where's the line between effective marketing and something that feels exploitative or uncomfortable? These are subjective questions without clear answers. Some people find this kind of promotion harmless, viewing it as actors doing their job to sell a movie. Others find it distasteful, particularly when it involves blurring the lines between professional collaboration and personal relationships. There's also a gendered element to consider. Would we be having the same conversation if the genders were reversed? If a married male actor was talking about his female co-star this way, would the response be different? Either way, it's a fascinating case study in modern film marketing and how far actors and producers are willing to go to cut through the noise of an oversaturated entertainment landscape. In an era where dozens of movies compete for attention every week, simply being good isn't enough. You need a hook, a narrative, something that makes people pay attention. Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi talking about each other like characters in a romance novel? That's a hook. Whether it's one you want to bite is entirely up to you. So what do you think? Is this brilliant marketing, or has the press tour crossed a line? And more importantly, does any of this actually matter if the film turns out to be great? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more analysis of Hollywood publicity strategies and what's really happening behind the scenes, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown.